America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
And I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, February 21st, 2022. My name is Emma Vigeland, in for Sam Seder for the week, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Deva Woodly, Associate Professor of Politics at the New School for Social Research and author of Reckoning, Black Lives Matter, and the Democratic Necessity of Social Movements. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Macron is moonlighting as a couples therapist on the international stage. Biden has, in principle, agreed to meet with Putin to discuss Ukraine. Doesn't particularly help that Zelensky is now being vocal about preemptive sanctions and an expanded NATO membership. Domestic posturing with international implications. U.S. COVID cases and hospitalizations continue their steady decline. Yesterday just broke 100,000 cases after 800,000 new cases were reported a little over 5 weeks ago. So that's not even a steady decline. That's a precipitous drop. Good news for now. And the Biden administration is reportedly increasing assistance for vaccine production in 11 African nations. Only 12% of the African population is vaccinated. Yet another way for Western powers to give crumbs instead of just waiving the patents. Politico was reporting that Biden is actively looking for GOP support for whoever he nominates to the Supreme Court. Why? No one knows, but it does add credence to my fear that Clyburn's push for anti-labor candidate J. Michelle Childs is working. Former police officer Kim Potter was sentenced to 2 years in prison for killing Duante Wright during a traffic stop. She claims she confused her gun for a taser. And lastly, New York City Mayor Eric Adams and Governor Kathy Hochul are implementing a zero-tolerance policy for homeless individuals sleeping on subway cars in the dead of winter. Good for them. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, and everybody else as well. I don't identify as a lady. I mean, that's a little too proper for me. I'm back for this President's Day, I should say. I'm going to be hosting the show solo this week while Sam is out on vacation. I went to my cousin's bachelorette party, more like a going away, where we played a lot of board games and did temporary tattoos. So if you see this, I did not get tatted up this weekend. I mean, they're really ugly. I would like to think that if I do end up getting a tattoo, that I'm going to go with something a little bit better than what I have on right now. But yeah, that's the blotch that you might be seeing on my arm. Everybody else have a good weekend here?
Yeah, I'd say a pretty good weekend. I honestly, I don't like NBA All-Star Weekend because there's frankly not enough basketball. And so
it's not real basketball.
I don't like it. Yeah, I feel weird.
All right, and Bradley's nearing his birthday's coming up, so we're in the countdown mode here at the Majority Report. Everybody wish Saturday, so wish Bradley a preemptive happy birthday in the chat if you can. But let's turn to this Ukraine story, which continues to dominate the news cycle, even though a lot of it is conjecture. But I do think it's helpful to get some of this context, so there's a greater understanding of what's happening here. Late last week and over the weekend, the U.S. claimed that Russia was lying about its claim that it withdrew some thousands of troops from Ukraine's border. Now, luckily, despite that hiccup, Emmanuel Macron appears to have been able to get Putin and Biden to the table. Apparently, there's a tepid agreement on a scheduled meeting about this conflict, all while Ukrainian President Zelensky, who frankly seems pretty over his head, or in over his head, is now publicly pleading for preemptive sanctions, echoing what the U.S. war hawks have been saying, and for an expedited NATO expansion and inclusion of Ukraine into NATO, both of which would dramatically increase the prospects of war. Now, this is different from what Zelensky has said in the past. He's trying to appear tough on the domestic front. So hopefully Biden doesn't take him too seriously. And it seems like he isn't, because Zelensky, as of now, isn't. It's a party of three and then maybe four with Boris Johnson, Macron, Biden, and Putin. But as we've mentioned on this program, we can trace all of what's happening now to the U.S. reneging on its promise not to allow Ukraine into NATO. Bush promised he'd do so on the way out, on his way out the door, which kind of echoes what Trump did in regards to Yemen, classifying the Houthis as a terrorist organization, which has grave implications as he was leaving office, just because the war hawks need a little bit of a gift after you're leaving power. Curry some favor with them if you ever want to work for, I don't know, some fancy think tank, although I guess presidents are above that. But regardless, you got to repay the neocons. So Bush did that, I believe, in 2008. NATO had already allowed many countries on the border of Russia into NATO. It started as a dozen nations, rapidly expanded to 30, including other former Soviet states, Estonia, the Czech Republic, Latvia, and Ukraine is obviously a former part of the Soviet Union, but it's also much larger than many of those nations that I just listed, and it's right on the border of Russia. Shares a large swath of the country's border, so there's a lot of shared space there, which is why this is such a big deal. So not only has the U.S. built up a 30-nation military alliance with multiple nations on Russia's border in the wake of the Cold War as a way to flex our muscle, the U.S. has been dangling this threat over their head to add another much larger nation to this military alliance after promising we wouldn't do so with Gorbachev. He got assurances that this wouldn't happen. The U.S. lied, and here we are now. So in terms of the context, it's also important to understand that someone like Zelensky does have to juggle the fact that there are still Ukrainians in his country that want to be a part of Russia, a larger nation with more prestige, particularly in areas like Donbass, which is right on the border there. However, with all that said, avoiding all bloodshed is the number one, number two, number three priority. The point is just that is the context for why Russia is posturing in this way and attempting to look strong in this area, because the reason that this is even a conflict in the first place is because the United States lied and broke its promise. And the other larger context is that all of these leaders are operating in their own way for domestic reasons. But Russia's chest puffing and military exercises are underpinned by that history. There's a fundamental mistrust of U.S. arrogance, which results in lies, broken promises, and they, as a nation with a bit more of a history, Russia has a fairly clear-eyed understanding of how bloated and incompetent our leadership is when it comes to specifically international policy, which we only know how to respond with brute military force, aggression, and a bumbling desire to make sure that we're the superpower for all of eternity, which is not going to happen. There is a ruling class in this country, our politicians, who refuse to acknowledge that we're on the decline. And it results in bungled answers, nonsensical stuff like what we saw from Kamala Harris. So that is a long prelude to this clip by Kamala Harris, asked about Putin, Ukraine, and the prospect of economic sanctions, she gives two answers in one.
But if you believe Putin has made up his mind, what leverage do you really have? Why not put those sanctions in place now?
The purpose of the sanctions has always been and continues to be deterrence. But let's also recognize the unique nature of the sanctions that we have outlined. These are some of the greatest sanctions, if not the strongest, that we've ever issued. As I articulated yesterday, it is directed at institutions, in particular financial institutions and individuals, and it will exact absolute harm for the Russian economy and their government.
But if Putin has made up his mind, do you feel that this threat that has been looming is really going to deter him?
Absolutely. We strongly believe. And remember also that the sanctions are a product not only of our perspective as the United States, but a shared perspective among our allies. And the allied relationship is such that we have agreed that the deterrence effect of these sanctions is still a meaningful one, especially because, remember also, we still sincerely hope that there is a diplomatic path out of this moment. And within the context then of the fact that that window is still although it is absolutely narrowing, but within the context of a diplomatic path still being open, the deterrence effect, we believe, has merit.
I mean, I don't understand how she's this bad at this point. She's contradicting herself in her answer there and in the United States' position that Russia has already invaded. Now, again, there are reports, of course, of shelling of parts of eastern Ukraine right now, which is something I completely and categorically denounce. But the point is that sanctions cannot be a deterrent if you're already claiming that an invasion is imminent or an invasion is happening. Very muddled response from her there. I still maintain that a lot of this is posturing, and I don't know if this is a controversial thing to say. My framing was a bit controversial. My point is just that the United States is treated with unseriousness because we have deserved and earned that reputation, and that is part of the context here. This was why, and again with Crimea and now here. There is, I don't like military action in any way, but there are members of the population in both of those areas of Ukraine, well, now Crimea is gone, that want to be a part of Russia. And that's a part of the context that you'll never get in the United States.
I would recommend folks check out the American Prestige most recent episode on the apparent Russian escalation the past few days. They have Derek Davison has a good mea culpa there, which basically says, I think, especially from the left, there's been too much of a collapsing into there's going to be nothing that happens versus there's going to be an invasion of Kiev, for instance. And Davison says, occupying regions like the Donbass that are frankly like pro-Russian, that is something that they said, they may be undersold as a possibility, like in the response to the the overt giant invasion stuff that we've all been hearing. I think that's worthwhile to note. And
the United States benefits from an increase in more intense rhetoric about like Kiev is about to get bombed any second now, as opposed to there is still there's a lot of gray area, especially along eastern Ukraine.
Yeah, I don't like Blinken and those folks. I think part of them, this is an urgent situation, but also it's something to talk about that isn't taking money from the Afghan treasury or starving kids domestically, which is, I think, things that I would like to talk more about than this stuff, because I think it's in the fog of war, frankly, and I think it's hard to have an accurate assessment of what's going on.
Right. Which is why, historical context, I think, is what should be at the forefront. What should be at the forefront here. Regardless, we are going to take a quick break. But first, we have a wonderful sponsor for you. The new year is here, and there's no better way to kick off 2022 than making sure you're feeling like your best self. And that includes staying hydrated with Liquid IV. One stick of Liquid IV in 16 ounces of water hydrates faster and more efficiently than water alone. Plus, Liquid IV has incredible hydration flavors like watermelon, lemon, lime, strawberry, pina colada, and more. Acai, my personal favorite. Although I do really like the strawberry and the watermelon as well. Sam is partial to the pina colada, as he'll remind you. If he was here, he would remind you of that. Liquid IV contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C. So if you're feeling a little run down, this is perfect for you. With Liquid IV, you can get 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. If like the weird color of Gatorade and the chemicaliness freaks you out, or other kind of drinks like that, maybe not them specifically, this is perfect for you. Liquid IV is made with premium ingredients and is non-GMO and free from gluten, dairy, and soy. The science of cellular transport technology is what makes Liquid IV so effective. It's designed to enhance rapid absorption of water and other key ingredients into the bloodstream. And I will say, I regularly use Liquid IV. I've gotten my family on it. When you're maybe like, oh, I got a little bit of a cold, you want an infusion of nutrients, and you won't need to stay hydrated if you're traveling or something like that. This is perfect for you. If you have a hangover, it's also helpful. It's even more effective at preventing a hangover if you remember to take it the night before. I can unfortunately speak to personal experience on both. Once when I forgot and once when I didn't forget. And remembering is good for you. Grab Liquid IV in bulk nationwide at Costco, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MajorityRep at checkout. That is MajorityRep. That's 25% off anything you order when you use promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Experience better hydration today at liquidiv.com. Promo MajorityRep. We are back, and we are joined right now by Deva Woodly, Associate Professor of Politics at the New School for Social Research and author of Reckoning Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Necessity of Social Movements. Deva, thank you so much for being with us today.
A pleasure to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited to dive into this. I want to talk a lot about radical Black feminist pragmatism, but one, I did appreciate how your book kind of, in the first chapter, you go right into it with this 2016 Obama quote about Black Lives Matter, which is, to be frank, dripping with condescension, pretty much. And it's also wrong, as you write. So let's just start there. Talk a little bit about what he said at that time period, and how, and if his misconception is indicative of a larger collective misconception about activism in general.
Yes. So at that time, and I can't remember the exact quote, but President Obama said something, gave a quote to the newspaper that said something like, activism is about getting a seat at the table. But once you have been invited to the table, then you need to sit down and, basically talk to the power holders and power brokers. And, at the time, I do think that there's some condescension in the quote, but I also think that it is all a general idea that is shared by a large majority of, the citizenry, the polity, is that activism is about making noise, but then as soon as you're invited into the halls of power, then it's about sort of brokering deals. And while there is some part of that that is correct, meaning that one should be negotiating for the things that one wants, another part of it is a complete misconception of what social movements are all about, right? Social movements are not just about brokering deals with current power holders. It's about reconfiguring power, right? So that is something that has to happen by an outside-inside strategy. You can't be entirely captured by power holders because they are going to tend to want to keep things the same, because it is under those conditions which they secured their power, right? But the point of social movements is to say that there are people who aren't being represented, and more profoundly, that the way that power and privilege is currently arranged is not adequate. And so that is something that has to, a call that has to come from outside the house.
Right, and I mean, the concept of reconfiguring power, I was about to comment on this, and you just said it. That's not something that somebody currently in power is interested in. You don't want to shake the boat or rock the boat if it's your boat, or if you're in the boat. And to me, that also strikes a chord with just general debates around electoralism versus movement building, and how it's quite convenient for certain very loud voices in power to conceive of activism, as you say. It's not about leveraging your power and holding on to it. It's about, okay, make your point and hand it off to the managers, which really does just serve the entrenched interests of our current system, obviously.
Right. A social movement that's successful has to challenge the way that power is, arranged. I mean, that's its purpose. And it's also an important democratic purpose, period, because this is the other sort of major point of the book. There's a reason why the subtitle is The Democratic Necessity of Social Movements, because we've had social movements for as long as we've had democracies. And that's for a reason, because it's a feature, not a bug. Over time, large institutions, any large institutions that have been designed with good goals in mind, according to the most progressive politics, institutions over time become institution serving rather than mission serving. And that's because institutions want to survive, right? Sort of as they are. In order for an institution to be democratic, that is responsible to the changing and evolving needs of the people, there has to be some kind of pull from the outside that says, wait a minute, your institutional tendencies are pulling in a direction that are not serving the mission. And we're here to call you back, right, to account. We're here to call you back toward whatever the constituency, the people, the association need and want out of this institution. And it is by our authority, right, any kind of democratic institution, it is by our authority that you operate at all. And so it is to our authority that you must be accountable. And that's what social movements do. And it's really important because without social movements, democratic institutions become democratic in name only. They become oligarchic and they become non-responsive. And so social movements are the thing that shakes democratic institutions out of those doldrums, right? Out of that kind of atrophy, and makes it possible for them to continue and for us not to devolve into oligarchy and authoritarianism.
Well, I mean, then that devolution seemed to be on rolling down the hill and unable to be stopped. Really, Black Lives Matter was such a massive movement that was the first in a long time period, that for a first moment where the mass mobilization was so massive.
Yeah, so large.
Right, so large that it was impossible to ignore. So before we get to the explosion of the movement, I just want to set the context a little bit more. How do you see this as punctuating this kind of end of history rot that seemed to be a part of this bloated U.S. empire that we're living in? I mean, like, I try not to be nihilistic, but we were talking about Russia, Ukraine earlier in the show, and it's from an objective perspective, if you're looking at it as an international actor, it's hard not to look at the United States as quite vulnerable as a superpower, given how precipitously we are declining, and how we've brought that on ourselves in many ways by being like liars and bad people on the international stage.
Well, I mean, yes, but here's the thing: is that end of history rot was happening on both the side of power, but also on the side of some citizenry. So this is also an important function of social movements and a really important effect of the Black Lives Matter movement, but also the constellation of other movements that are happening at the same time, right? Environmental justice movements, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas kids, right? The gun safety movement, the various women's and gender and abortion rights movements, labor movements, right? All of these movements are sort of happening in a constellation right now. And Black Lives Matter has been the largest and the most successful, I think, at organizing large numbers of people. But it's that organizing that's really important, because the citizenry had also been fooled into this kind of end of history, idea, right? That we could just sort of go on about our lives, that politics didn't really matter to us, that all we needed to do was to work and consume. And the slippage between the idea that working would be enough to consume as much as we needed in order to care for ourselves and the people we cared about became more and more and more stressful. But people had sort of lost the habit of turning to civic and political organizations for answers and to actually address those problems and to demand address from those who had power. And I call that in the book the depoliticization of public life, right? Public life had gone in the sort of 90s and 2000s to be really depoliticized. Well, really starting in the 80s, right? To be depoliticized. And what's really necessary for a democratic polity is not only democratic institutions and power holders that are made to be responsive, but a citizenry that knows that they can demand that responsiveness and knows how to do it. So that's another really important part of social movements, is that it helps people remember what it means to be democratic citizens, right? It helps people remember what it means that they are the authority from which all power flows. And that sort of is the job of organizers and organizing, right? It's the way that people understand themselves to be actors, right? Positive, affirmative, like actors in the polity, and not just people who are witnessing power holders make a mess of everything.
Well, it provides the body politic with agency, which
That's
I think is key. What, and I think you touched on this a bit, but I'm asking if you could expand a little bit on how you perceive this current surge in activism versus how is it distinct from the Black Civil Rights Movement of the 60s in terms of national mobilization and also tactics?
Well, I mean, I think that it builds a lot on the mobilizations in the 1960s, in part because, the leaders of this movement that is happening right now learn from the living members who are called elders in the movement, right? People who were involved in the civil rights and Black Power movements of the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and tried to sort of learn some of the lessons that, they sort of take with them. And there are a number of things, I think, that this movement has learned and has decided to do differently. And I think that one of them is to really understand themselves as a multi-generational movement that has to be sustainable. This is also where the notion of a politics of care really comes in, and the notion of being a leader-full movement rather than a movement that has one or two charismatic leaders at the top. Right? But instead, the point of the movement is to create this proliferation of leaders and organizations who can move from a bunch of different push points in the polity and also in culture in order to not only sort of push demands, right, policy demands forward, but also to change the common sense of the polity, to change the way that our political problems are understood, defined, and addressed. And so this movement has been working really hard on those fronts in that kind of broader and more expansive way, and very intentionally, because I think that what they learned from the civil rights generation is that it actually will take more than one generation to dismantle, white supremacy, the version of capitalism we have right now, and patriarchy. Right.
Right. And you mentioned politics of care. So I'm wondering if we could go and move into that part of our discussion here. If you could just define that for us, that clearly seems to be a significant distinction from the civil rights movement of past, based on just understanding things, understanding oppression as traumatic, as opposed to just wrong. Is that a fair characterization of how that's a shift?
Yes, I mean, it's part of it. I mean, I think a really key part of it is that our movements, the civil rights movement, the labor movement, the women's movement, right, the movements of the 20th century really had this notion that's, I think, was pretty common to the 20th century, that it was all about the cause, right? It was the cause, right? And if people fell down in the battle for the cause, then that was okay, right? Because the cause was the most important thing. But what we know now, right, is that, a part of getting the cause, right, of racial, social, and economic justice to be the characteristics of the political systems of the 21st century is that we have to center care, right? We have to take care of ourselves and each other. The basis, right, of justice politics is that we need to fairly distribute responsibilities for care. Right? And that includes caring for ourselves in our movements as we pursue, right, and build the other world that we believe is possible. So yes, I think that is a major difference. It's acknowledging that injustice is traumatic. It is acknowledging that in order to address that trauma, we need to not only address it personally in terms of therapy and wellness practices, but actually address it politically, because the conditions that create so much of our suffering are structural conditions, and we can't heal from that only through like meditation and yoga, right?
or through convictions of murderers of Black people.
No,
I mean,
no.
so I get like very enraged talking about how sometimes, like, I forget exactly what Biden or Pelosi said after Chauvin was convicted, but just like lauding the historic moment, and we're coming off the news that Kim Potter was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I mean, can you just talk about how like empty that appearance of catharsis is? Because I mean, it's like a sugar high. It's going to go away in a second, and everything is going to remain.
Right. I mean, that's the issue, right? Is that, the system will sacrifice a person or two in order to maintain itself, right? And I mean, the people involved, when I say the system, it sounds very sort of like opaque, but I just mean the people who are involved in the systemic processes that make Black life precarious will make an example here and there, right, of people in order to continue to legitimize the system as it is. But of course, the criminal legal system is not legitimate as it is. The kind of extractive and exploitative capitalism and racialized capitalism that causes the inequalities that create the environment in which violence, harm, poverty, and death are more likely for Black people and other people of color, is not legitimate, right? And so part of what has to happen is making sense of that delegitimation in public, right? And this is also why the politics of abolition is so important. And that's really, really important to emphasize, because I have to say, I started writing this book 5 years ago, and 5 years ago, I was not an abolitionist, right? Like I was, a kind of liberal reformer, like many people, like most people, right? According to polling on the criminal legal system. But in doing this research, I realized that part of the problem is our entire approach to harm, right? And that we're not actually thinking about what kinds of things cause harm, right? And we're not trying to address the conditions in which harm is most likely. We're instead just trying to punish people, and especially punish people in systematically acceptable ways, which means people who are already disadvantaged on a number of sort of structural markers. In order to sort of allow the system to continue limping on the way it is, while we're not more safe, right? While we're not happier, while we're not more prosperous, right? On the whole. And that's the thing that really, and interestingly, the thing that really allowed me to come into the abolitionist frame of mind was actually the defund the police demand. Because as I was trying to sort of make sense of this demand, for me, as a philosophical pragmatist, that demand made sense on its face. First of all, I didn't know how much of municipal budget, right? That's most of the discretionary funds, right, of municipal, that is city budgets, get spent on police and policing, right? Between 30 and 50% of discretionary funds in municipal budgets on average. And those budgets tend to increase every year. Meanwhile, budgets for schools, recreation, social services, all of those budgets are fair game to get cut, and in many municipalities are cut to almost nothing. And it didn't make sense empirically, right? It didn't make sense from the point of view of the data, because from what we know about safe communities are communities in which people have access to basic needs, have hope for the future, are able to plan, feel like they are there's some stability and some ability to move toward the future that they desire. And none of those things are helped by police. And yet, most of our discretionary funds are poured, right, into these institutions that don't work to create the conditions that we say we want. For me, that's when it really clicked, honestly. I was like, oh, this actually doesn't make logical sense, right? So that means it's a project and a product of something else. It's a project and a product of an ideology that we're all taught from the time that we're very, very small, right? But doesn't appear to be true from the decades of data that we have. So if that's not true for me as a scholar, then that means you have to turn in a really different direction. And that's why the radicalism and the pragmatism for me go together. Right?
Well,
because
yeah, exactly. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Because the radicalism is not about a particular position or set of positions. It's about asking what's at the root of the problem we say we have. And then the pragmatism is, okay, so then what do we have to try in order to fix it? And, in this case, right, shrinking police and punitive forces, right, rethinking how we deal with harm and care overall. These are the things that actually make practical sense if what we say we want is a safer, more prosperous, more well society.
Right. And you say as a scholar, it doesn't, of course, make sense to you. Or I'm sorry, as a scholar, this is the conclusion that you drew. As someone that covers politics, I'm coming to that conclusion as well, because I see police budgets and the way that they exercise their power as soft fascism, and sometimes it's just fascism, and the only way you deal with fascism is abolition and defeat. And I feel like we naturalized our institutions in this country to such a degree that it is so impossible for the collective to envision another future. And I mean, I'm curious about your take on this. Like, I don't think it's uniquely American, but there is an Americanness to it that I can't really put my finger on, and that's probably just white supremacy. But
well, I mean, white supremacy is global, though. I do agree with you about this sort of, there's a certain Americanness to it. And I love the way you put it, the naturalization of institutions, right? We have a very particular founding myth that is very, very strong in this country, right? And that makes it, and you can tell also by how both parties argue, but especially how the right wing argues in this day, is that there is this sort of hagiography, this like notion that America's diverse birth was somehow divine, instead of a product of strenuous political strategy and action that took place over decades, right? Impressive, but nevertheless, just a product of human activity, right? Human imagination and the enactment of ideas. But that naturalization, which is imbued with a ritualistic and almost sort of divine notion, it does make it really hard for people to envision or accept or embrace that we are just as alive and just as responsible for the conditions of our living and the conditions of the living of the people who come after us as the people who were in the founding generation or any generation in between, right? But that imagination, that pragmatic imagination, that practical imagination that says this set of circumstances is not working for us as it is now. We have the power to actually alter these circumstances in a way that will benefit more of us and that will benefit people in the future. So we need to take that up. That is the thing I think that this social movement wants to do more than anything else, is to create space for that pragmatic and radical imagination that says, we don't have to live this way. We can choose differently. What we have to do is capture enough levers of power so that we can change things. And that also includes dismantling some institutions that no longer work for us and building something else that does work for us now. It's also really important to understand that this is not utopian, right? It's not about creating the perfect society for all time. It's about iterations. What we build, if we're successful in averting fascism and authoritarianism in this nation, in this generation, which is not a guarantee, but if we were successful at that, what we would build now wouldn't be good for all time. It would also have to be altered as circumstances change in future generations. And if we could build into the American common sense understanding this notion that change over time is good and will be necessary, that would do more for the longevity, I think, and benefit of, this country, this continent, and the world than probably anything else.
Yeah, I'm fearful that we're a little far gone in this area, but your book does give me hope. I mean, in terms of your analysis of Black Lives Matter, and you mentioned the pragmatism. I want to get into the radical Black feminist pragmatism as like the way you underpinned your analysis. But I guess I would love if you could start maybe even in 2013 talking about Trayvon Martin and all of those like Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, the pre George Floyd murders, because something happened and then there was this massive shift. And I wonder what you attribute that to. Is that just Trump, or is that and people kind of understanding, all right, we have to fight him? I don't think that's the case, but how do you identify it?
Well, I think it was a confluence of a bunch of different things. And, you know, I have to say that this book is based on the interviews and observations with people who are actively involved in organizing, and that I am not an organizer in this movement. I'm a scholar, right? I'm recording this. So as I was sort of talking to people in a bunch of different organizations at a lot of different levels of leadership, you know, what became clear to me is that many of them had a similar kind of story of evolution, right? Meaning that in, you know, when the George Zimmerman verdict came down and that he would be acquitted of the murder of Trayvon Martin, a lot of people were shocked, were surprised, right? And I know that in sort of common discourse, you know, people will say kind of cynically, oh, you know, I knew it would happen, or, you know, what else could possibly happen in a racist nation, et cetera. But we were smack dab in the middle of the Obama era, right? You know, a lot of people had sort of worked their butts off, right, to elect this person.
You can say ass.
Okay.
Say ass, yes.
You know, and it had been kind of their first political experience. A ton of people who it hadn't been their first political experience had not believed that there would be a Black person elected as president of the United States in their lifetime. So even though almost not very many people believe that we were in a post-racial society, for example, a lot of people did believe that we had turned a major corner, right? Like that at least we were kind of on the way to something good and, or something better, right? And the Zimmerman verdict really kind of squashed that in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And it was like a moment of shock. So many people that I interviewed described, you know, being in tears, being in disbelief, being in a rage, like angry, you know, all of the above, and really understanding that they needed to start to pay attention, right? That things were not actually going apace. We were not at the end of history. And indeed, we were in danger of regression, right? Some very serious regression. And so, you know, the way that it was is obviously, we know the kind of story of the founding women of Black Lives Matter Global Network Foundation and the hashtag Black Lives Matter, right, that erupted on the internet. But that was mostly a kind of social media phenomena that was happening, that was kind of raising awareness. But what it did was create a community, at least online, where people started paying attention. And when you know, and when Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, a lot of people decided that this was the moment they were going to do something. They had been shocked by the Zimmerman verdict, but this was the moment where they were going to get involved. And so that's when you started having a proliferation of actual organizations, right? People founded organizations that had lives offline, and had missions and started to be resourced and organized offline, and started building capacity for what would then become the massive uprisings that happened in 2020.
Right. And that, as you mentioned, that's actual organizing, actual organizations, as opposed to, you know, we have debates with people sometimes who confuse social media activity with organizing, and that's a real, that's untrue, and it belittles the work of organizers because it is grueling and it is very targeted. And the lens, the way in which you talk about BLM being targeted is through radical Black feminist pragmatism. Now, I've danced around this, but this is such a huge part of your analysis. Could you explain radical Black feminist pragmatism, RBF, we can shorten it,
I know.
Right?
It's cumbersome, but each word is really important. So
I agree. Yeah.
So radical is a mode of questioning, right? Like I said, radical comes from the Latin radix, which means the root, right? It's a mode of questioning that doesn't take the given as the only place that we can start, right? That says, no, let's actually look at the root or look for the root of the problem. Black feminism is an ethical system. It has deep roots in American political thought, and it is a mode of reasoning that demands that we reason from margin to center, that we take people's lived experiences as the basis for our intellectual questioning, our questions about what justice is, and that centers a kind of politics of care. And then pragmatism is a mode of judgment that guides action, right? And pragmatism here is philosophical pragmatism, not sort of political 1990s third way pragmatism, right? Like pragmatism here is, again, another sort of mode of thinking that is not utopian, right? That embraces imagination, but embraces imagination for action and assumes that as we go forward, we will have to try things, see if they're aligned with our values, and then make adjustments and try again, right? It is a politics of iteration. It involves analysis. It involves imagination, and it involves actually building in the world, right? So each one of these things is really important. So if you have the radical, which questions, right, at the root of the problem, Black feminism, which centers the marginalized and lived experience, and pragmatism, which says, hey, we've got to assess and experiment and act, then you have, I think, a really powerful framework for action that can be both effective and compassionate and transformative all at the same time.
And what ways have you seen this both be successful with BLM and then maybe not so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, this is a political philosophy, so it undergirds most of the activity in the movement, right? It's just beliefs that are widely shared. And I think one of the ways it's been successful is that it's allowed the movement to sustain itself for almost a decade, right? After being attacked at intervals, right? Attacked at intervals and then praised at other intervals, right? Throughout, as the polity's attention turns toward the activity of the movement and away, as politicians try to persecute members of the movement as a whole, to punish people who are involved in it, or to praise them, and try to sort of co-opt them into sort of inside positions. So radical Black feminist pragmatism has allowed the movement to sort of be built such that it is leaderful, rather than having only a couple of charismatic leaders that can be removed in a variety of different ways, either by being co-opted, being assassinated, just being exhausted, right? Instead, you have a whole ethic of making sure that people who are coming up in movement organizations are able to lead, right, from where they are, and they're taught to organize other people into the movement. Although more of that can and should be done. And that's actually a huge part of what's happening. The conversations that I hear are happening right now. It's all about organizing more people and base building, actually. So that's, so that's one thing I think that this political philosophy has done. I think that and enabled to happen. But I think that, movements, especially over a long period of time, right? This movement is no longer new. It's almost 10 years old.
Isn't that crazy?
I know, it's crazy. I know. Over time, transitions have to happen, and people have to reevaluate what they think the best way forward is. And then also external conditions change, right? So it's a little bit of whiplash to go from, a little bit of like breathless media coverage of the biggest protest in US history that was also the most diverse, right, for weeks on end, to the critical race theory panic, right, that has also been sort of taken seriously and fueled by media, and also led to a ton of legislation, right, which the earlier praise did not lead to, right? Not to the same degree, and not without contingency. So, what radical Black feminist pragmatism has to continue to do is to allow this movement to sustain and move forward boldly, even amidst these attacks. And that's not an easy task. It has to allow the movement to continue pushing things like defund. It has to allow the movement to continue talking about housing inequality and what it might mean to, give things away, right? Instead of making everything transactional, right? So it has to create a context in which people can feel confident that these sort of waves of interest, disinterest, praise, scorn, persecution, or attempts at co-optation are normal phases of movement. And it's important to dig in and continue to try to push forward with the transformation of common sense, which is the thing that is really going to allow changes to happen, both in terms of concrete policy changes and in terms of changes in our living conditions.
It's about like steadiness and consistency as well, especially in the face of, and this will be my last kind of discussion point here. BLM in many ways helped Biden get elected. I mean, it was the pandemic, and it was outrage about the way that the Republicans and just the country was responding to the murder of George Floyd and others. And yet there has been zero push to get rid of the filibuster in order to pass substantive legislation that would end qualified immunity, that would defund the police in any real way. In fact, Biden was promoting, let's give them more funds so they can be better at their job. The amount of strength, he didn't end up following through on that, but that was something he opined about publicly. The amount of strength that takes, you're only able to continue to move forward with all of these losses stacking up if you have a practical and consistent underpinning.
Right. And one that is really rooted in the notion that is really about creating conditions that you can care for yourself, others, and the polity, because it allows you to turn back to the question of what does it mean to do to help somebody right now? What does it mean to do to defend and save Black lives right now? What does it mean to do? What kind of things can we do in terms of mutual aid, in terms of culture work, in terms of getting new people elected, right? Like, this is not just eschewing electoral politics. It's about also turning your face away from the national, especially presidential politics, but also other national democratic politics, which is dominated, by septa and octogenarians who are acting based on a world that no longer exists, right? Acting out of nostalgia, right, in a large part. So it really is also about packing the decision-making bench with people who share this worldview and hoping that you get there. And when I say get there, I mean get to positions of power in which you can protect your communities and push new policy and institutional arrangements forward before devolution into authoritarianism and fascism.
Yeah, there will be a new fascist at least in the primary in 2024 nationally, and then of course we have these kinds of strengths and systems are immensely important. So I really appreciate your work here. Deva Woodly, Associate Professor of Politics at the New School for Social Research and author of Reckoning Black Lives Matter and the Democratic Necessity of Social Movements. Can't thank you enough for your time today. Really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, come back, wrap up the first hour of the program. We are back, and that brings us to the end of the first hour of the Majority Report. But first, before we head into the fun half, take your calls, take your IMs. What's happening on Left Reckoning, Matt?
Well, we had a really good discussion with Jason and Pascal last week, but for patrons, yesterday we released the second part of our Karl Marx reading series. We're taking the essays of Karl Marx pretty much chronologically. So we did his two-part essay on the Jewish question. The first part is an insanely ahead of its time defense of the right of Jews to experience full political rights, despite some Christians were saying at that time some folks were saying they need to liberate themselves from their religion before they ask for, things like voting rights and stuff like that. Marx was against that. And then part two is a very kind of problematic portion where Marx sort of ends a lot of anti-Semitic tropes to try to accuse Western civilization of being the true money grubbers. And we get into that, and also Marx's an anti-Semitic letter Marx wrote. So we get into the problematic Marx, but we also get into the important thing to know about that essay, which is he was on the right side of history, defending Jewish folks to have political rights. Marx himself was a grandson of two rabbis. His father had converted around the time Marx was born because there was a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment that basically meant, like political rights. You need to, if you want to continue having a business, you got to lose the Judaism. So we get into that history of Marx. So Marx on the Jewish question, patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get me and David discussing that.
Amazing. All right. Well, we are going to head into the fun half now, taking your calls, 646-257-3920. See you then.
You are in for it. All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Oh, no. Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Snowflake says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
Oh no, Sam Seder! What a fucking nightmare!
Bring back DJ.
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danner.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense. You see white people doing drugs, they look worse than normal white people, and all white people look disgusting.
And the alpha males,
psych, fuck them.
Snowflake says what? Snowflake says what?
A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. Okay, I'm making stupid money. Hell of a lot of bank. A hell of a lot of bank. All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are black. And the Africans are back.
When you see Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck them. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are black. Africans are back.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Just was getting into the call system. I have turned off the voicemail. Feel free to call in.
Sorry, I have the funniest tweet.
Okay. Oh.
So this is Des Bryant. He is the former Dallas Cowboys wide receiver, is my understanding. I don't know if
that's my quarterback.
And he has
Was
a
that
tweet
him?
here.
No.
I'm not sure.
All right, well, start over.
Well, anyway, this is Des Bryant, at Des Bryant on Twitter. He's I don't want to. Well, here's
Tio.
a tweet. I'm educating women right now, which is that's a great first line to a tweet. That's a good first 5 words.
You're educating women right
I'm
now?
educating women right now about NFTs and hearing these women say, my brain haven't worked like this in weeks, months, and years. A natural, genuine smile came across my face. I'm thankful.
Wait, hold on. Put it up there.
So yeah, I'm educating women right now about NFTs, and I'm hearing these women say, my brain haven't worked like this in weeks, months, and years. A genuine smile came across my face. I'm thankful.
Educating, so that's like the best layer of it too. That like women don't have the brain power to understand NFTs, and I'm benevolent.
And look at his cool ape. His king ape.
Yeah, that'll be worth millions and millions of dollars. Anyway, amazing start.
Wow.
I don't even really have anything to add.
I'm educating women right now.
What does that mean? He's in front of a class? I feel like a fake fan. I confused Tio with Des Bryant. Both
badass receivers.
Both badass receivers for the Dallas Cowboys.
I wonder if Tio would have. I imagine like Tio like pulling a NFT token or like I mean it's tough to do because it's all non-tangible, but incorporating it into a touchdown dance.
Turkish Martha Stewart writes in, possibly dumb question. People talk about how NATO expansion threatens Russia. How does it threaten Russia other than by preventing Russia from potentially invading those countries that NATO expands into? Okay, it's not a dumb question. I appreciate you asking it. Imagine if, I don't know, in the 1960s, Cuba, there was talk about how Cuba could be obtaining or could be working with the Soviet Union in a certain way. And that's really close to the United States' border. And we're going to go nuts about it. I mean, we almost started a nuclear war because Cuba had a relationship with the Soviet Union. And there was fear about that being way too close to our border. So if there's a 30+ nation alliance, and the biggest country on your eastern border is in that alliance, plus a lot of smaller countries, plus the most powerful military in the world.
And you want to extend it to portions of a country that are, pro-Russian.
Yes, exactly. And you're going to envelop the eastern parts of the country that kind of have a little bit of remorse about the fact that there are many people in that nation. Now, I'm not saying that military exercises and invasion and shelling is the right way to get those people in. Absolutely it's not. But the point is just that there are sympathetic Ukrainians who want to still be Russian in those areas, and then you would be taking the entirety of the nation, putting it into a military alliance with the United States, which also brings up a conversation about how dumb it is that the United States would, if they would preemptively sanction Russia in this area, further isolating Russia, which already there's more domestic manufacturing there. China does that as well. They have self-sufficiency in a way that the United States no longer does, pushing them towards a relationship with China, which is apparently our new biggest boogeyman and foe. There's, what was it? Xi Jinping appeared with him at the Olympics, was it? Putin? That's a big deal. So something to watch there is just further continuing to say that the United States is entertaining the possibility, which is basically what NATO is, of Ukraine joining, continues to be a provocation. And it also drives them further and further into the arms of China, which, I mean, for me, it's like, okay, that's a wash. But for the United States' national interests, which they pretend to care about, that's something that they should be concerned about.
I mean, why would extending the anti-Russian alliance to Russia's borders be at all problematic? I think the question answers itself.
Yeah, but I appreciate you asking it without, you know, it's not a dumb question. It's just that's just, imagine, say, Canada or Mexico developed a military alliance with Russia. Sam from Ottawa, Ukraine NATO member is a nonsense talking point. NATO will never invade Russia. Ukraine will never invade Russia. They have nukes. Russia is entirely free of physical consequences and will always be so long as they have those nukes. I don't know what you mean, though. I mean, it's, yes, the United States doesn't want to get into, aka NATO doesn't want to get into a ground war with Russia, especially on their soil. But the Russia has an interest in the United States not expanding its power to a country that has a lot of Russian sympathizers in it. So they're just acting in their own interests here. And like, this is not appeasement. This is just being rational. Vote blue, bleed red. Emma, I'm a Democratic campaign volunteer, and I must say that many previous Democratic voters are now becoming less and less active on the ground. Why do you spend so much time focusing on failures of Biden and corporate Democrats and so little time on the wins? Don't you think you are helping the larger cause? Well, I'm in the works of trying to get a candidate on this week. I'm trying to do a little bit more. Bradley is doing that. I'm doing it. Bradley is on my behalf, reaching out to it. I mean, we're critics. Like we comment on the news, and
did I miss something? Was it, what are the victories we're supposed to be champion? Like, I'm sorry, we have no infrastructure thing passed. I mean, okay, the bipartisan thing. We just robbed the Afghan treasury to pay victims of 9/11 who we didn't want to pay, and we're having more kids in hunger. So this show is not going to be a like happy one, frankly. I am a person who thinks it's usually useful enough, if you're going to vote for the Democrat. Okay, like, be at ease on that front. But it's not enough at all, clearly.
Colorado baby boomer. So Emma, so you're saying Russia should decide Ukraine's fate? Sounds like it. USA is an imperialist power, therefore any enemy of USA good. It's definitely not what I'm saying. It's definitely not what I'm saying. I don't support an invasion, but I do think that the context is important. This isn't like, I mean, honestly, it's not even analogous to anything that the United States has done over the past 50 plus years of foreign policy, invading nations preemptively. There's actual geopolitical history here that's not being talked about by the Western press.
Yeah, I don't like, the thing is I think if Putin has the capacity to be an aggressor, clearly, and I think that is something that shouldn't be denied, but at the same time, like, taking America. I'm not interested in any sort of preemptive action at all. So I think at this point, my thing with Russia is let's see what happens and then react to it. And like I don't particularly take our intelligence agency's word for any of this stuff.
Calling from a 612 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Emma. Hold on. Let me take out speakerphone.
Okay.
My name is Carl. I'm from Minneapolis. I called in a few weeks ago and was just kind of encouraging everybody about we're having a rough time with the pandemic. And I just wanted to call in and say I just got a job, the best job I've ever gotten, making 40 hours a week, working 40 hours a week. And I just want to say, everybody, hang in out there. Thank you guys for what you do. I'll get off and you can take another caller.
Oh, my God. That's very sweet. I appreciate the kind words. I'm glad that you got a great job. Oh, he hung up. Look at that. Calling from a 410 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, is it Nathan from Maryland?
I believe if that's you, then it's you.
Well, fantastic. Well, I'm listening on the phone, so I couldn't hear it through my computer.
Oh, okay. All good.
I'm calling in to say that things are also looking up on my front. Got a new job. But more importantly, a friend of mine and I, we are currently both running for office in a low-level local seat, which has outsized importance in terms of how much people actually think about it. Because in Maryland, we have a process whenever there's a vacancy in the state house where the county-level party is the one that always replaces the empty seat from whichever party that the person resigned from, got appointed to another position like a judgeship or anything similar along that front. And so what I'm doing is I'm running for the Montgomery County Democratic Central Committee.
Okay.
Just because I want to have somebody progressive who will be on that committee who's not going to vote, for example, for the chairperson of the committee to fill a vacancy. Instead, we can have actual questions asked in the candidate forums about progressive priorities like a Green New Deal for Maryland, police reform, and many other similar issues that actually matter to voters on the ground in order to determine a new state-level office holder.
And okay, go on.
You go.
Well, I just wanted to see how you think people can best support your campaign.
Well, right now, I'm running at the same time as a friend of mine who's a former state delegate.
Yeah.
His name is Saqib Ali, who's also from the district, and
can you spell it?
He's going to also be helping me out with mailers, and so basically,
can you just spell
Ali?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, I was about to. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Go on.
Yeah. So if you go to Ali for Maryland, ALIFOR Maryland.com.
Okay.
You can donate to him, and he'll be helping you with some campaign resources while I'm getting set up on my end. He's running on a Green New Deal for Maryland, as I mentioned, and every other progressive issue that you can imagine. He's endorsed by the largest Mid-Atlantic immigrant rights organization, CASA in Action.
Okay.
And one of the most progressive members of the state house. And he is second place in a race where the top three win in terms of his fundraising at the current moment. So I'm very optimistic about both of our chances. And this is really how you start to see personnel changes on the local level. And it's particularly important because 1/3 of the members of the state level assembly get their seats through appointment. So these races are a lot more important than you might think, given the amount of press that get assigned to them. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. All right. Well, I appreciate all Ali for Maryland.com, ALI for spelled out Maryland.com. I'm looking at the website now. Support these guys if you can. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much, Nathan.
Yep. I'll re-up an email where I sent to the producers to see if we can get him on the show because he's got a long record of supporting Palestinian rights, and I think he would be a very good guest for you guys as well. So thanks so much for taking my call.
Yeah, you do that, and we'll look into it. Thanks so much. All right. Mr. Saved Me. I think American imperialism runs deep in America, and people don't understand or comprehend. We are the bad guys. We supply weapons to anyone. That seems to be what we're good at, and then we destroy the country we're supposed to be helping. It's loony. It's loony. Alex Charles Dukes. It's true NATO will never invade Russia, but Russia is super paranoid about the US and NATO's intentions and has been since the end of World War II. Ukraine is the buffer. The large swaths of the Ukrainian population don't want to be a buffer. China is the opposite. They mainly want to reincorporate Taiwan and control the South China Sea and see the US as in the way. US foreign policy should be geared towards the moral right to govern, being linked to the consent of the governed in the case of both situations and in general. That doesn't mean going to war, just what the diplomatic stance should be. Which, yes, there's a whole separate context too about US involvement in trying to drum up artificial NATO support in Ukraine, which is a whole separate conversation. But what do you want to say, Matt? Okay. Matt forgot. All right, let's do a clip. Let's do a clip. Oh boy. Well, this isn't so much of a clip, but this is just an I told you so. I love being right. I often am. When she first came on the scene, I thought Tulsi Gabbard might be an interesting progressive voice. Quickly, I did a little bit more research, and, you know, when I wasn't an intern, figured it out fairly quickly that she was a grifter. Got a lot of hate for it from the Jimmy Dore stands. She's the true progressive of our time. She's better than Bernie, in fact, because she's anti-imperialist.
She's an anti-imperialist, and that's where I draw the line. Also, I'm in a month from now, I'm going to be making my clear purity principle about Medicare for all. But right now, it's about anti-imperialism.
Right, except she didn't co-sponsor Medicare for all until she decided to run for fucking president.
Because
and
at
then
that
she
point,
got
it was about anti-imperialism.
Well, right. Well, she was too focused on not allowing Muslim refugees into the United States. All right, just a jag-off. And maybe she's like starting her stand-up comedy routine with this latest appearance. She's going to be speaking, perhaps telling jokes, or this is some elaborate stunt. But do we have this up?
Yep, it's up.
Oh, it's up. A long preface, which everybody's already been able to see. Tulsi Gabbard speaking at CPAC.
Also, Enos Freedom, Cantor, aka or formerly known as Enos Cantor. I mean, the Tulsi Gabbard thing, it really is like she made a huge splash by endorsing Bernie, and that was very smart of her to do, because it papered over the reality of her, which is she's a right-wing, frankly Islamophobic plant that is pro-military, but just wants to use military in a smarter way.
Yeah, well, she's spoken out in favor of being smarter on drone strikes, aka just using them more. Obviously, she has financial and personal connections to the BJP and to Muslim extremists in India, including Narendra Modi, which should be enough. But there was like, oh, a little bit of plausible deniability, even though I'm speaking at these functions and clearly
and APAC functions.
Right,
well.
Right. Let alone her stance on Israel. The common thread. She was also, by the way, she got onto the national stage because she was featured on Fox News to such a degree because she was openly critical about Obama not saying radical Islamic terrorism. She's an Islamophobe that understood that she could kind of, since she was pigeonholed into the Democratic Party and doesn't have any real ideological underpinnings except the Islamophobia, that she could ride in the more populist messaging coming out of the Bernie Sanders campaign, appear in opposition to the Democratic establishment, since they didn't really like her that well. I should say she was a part of the DNC at that point, but she saw a strategic opportunity, she seized it, and now she sees another strategic opportunity, and that's really the only thing that is consistent with Tulsi Gabbard.
Looking forward to the speech.
Yeah, me too. But maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe this is a long stand-up routine, and she has learned from her buddy Jimmy because, you know, she went on his show. And Bernie wouldn't fucking come on my show. Maybe she figured out that she could be a comic too, was going to go to a CPAC, roast a few of them, bring her progressive values to a conservative audience, but something tells me that's not going to happen.
She doesn't have the capacity to be funny for the start.
But what are you talking about, Matthew? Oh, always
I love
a
to ride my
pleasure, Sean.
surfboard on Twitter.
Aloha. Would you like a video of me doing
Yoga.
an exercise? This is to promote healthy eating, not to satiate the incels that drive up my engagement. Oh! Psycho. Sam Customs Panels. Matt, did you forget the famous TO celebration where he caught a touchdown pass, then pulled out his phone and bought a Bored Ape on OpenSea? One of my most cherished childhood sports memories. Happy birthday, Bradley, says Sam's Custom Panels.
Get an NFT of the Sharpie and the ball that he signed.
Nancock. Okay. Emma, can you please objectively give your opinion about the recent PR blitz AOC went on talking about her interviews on elite magazines and mouthpieces? She might very well become AOC in 10 years because she is more... What? She is more focused on PR messaging than actual policy like Ilhan Omar or Jay Paul or Cory Bush. Wait. AOC might become AOC in 10 years? I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, she's I don't read elite magazines. Define an elite magazine for me, and then I'll respond to your question.
Yes, it's silly.
Glass Seagull, thinking about Michael impersonating Sam, scolding Nathan for not having his own website and every similar domain yet. Yes, he's all about purchasing hyperlinks and links, and I don't really get it. V writes in, damn Emma, I didn't know Tulsi was the creator of Theranos. See, it's not that hard for Elizabeth Holmes to do. To lower your voice, it's just, you know, maybe I should do a whole show like that, and then people will think of me authoritatively, and then I can make a lot of money. Send me $1 million. Okay. Sam Stones, can't believe you're making fun of Jimmy. Didn't you see he's permanently disabled? Well, we did see this. Bradley, you want to put that up there? I hesitate to even give this attention. Because I don't... All right, you don't want to do it?
No.
All right, we're going to move past it. The point is just, you know, regardless of your personal experiences with COVID, every broadcaster should report what the data says responsibly and provide those facts to their audience, because you're
more
speaking
people
to
have
a
died.
general population.
More people have died from Omicron than Delta, is my understanding. And this dickhead is still talking about how you don't need to get vaccinated. So
yeah,
because you had a bad experience apparently.
Apparently, who knows? Will from Indiana, Jimmy Dore, Jackson Hinkle, and Tulsi Gabbard are going to release an album called American Patriots and Anti-Imperialists under the name AOC Bad. Also curious to hear your all's thoughts on schools like Indiana University going mask optional. Seems very risky under the current circumstances. Left is best, says Will from Indiana.
My thing on all this stuff is that it should be tied to case rates and hospital levels and things like that, like metrics. So I don't know what's going on in Indiana, but like for New York, like we're at as low as we've been, in my understanding, maybe I'm wrong about this, but my understanding is we're as low as we've been for a long time, since definitely before Omicron. And so I like, it's when it's sort of against something like rising cases and stressed ICUs that it becomes more relevant to me. And like the general like I feel like places should be laxing when things, and we're laxing too fast, obviously. Like that conversation needs to be had. There should be more support for people, but I also think, like, you know, this is it's not like I don't know, it sort of reflexively getting upset about a laxing of these things in the face of, you know, cases going down that's not what I'm about anyway. I think you need to stay focused on, you know, keeping it sort of data driven.
All right, let's do another clip. Oh man, Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's what we'll go to.
Wait, was Des Bryant talking to Marjorie Taylor Greene?
I guess. I mean, there seems to be some overlap now. Marjorie Taylor Greene has come out as pro crypto First, she sprinkles in some anti-Semitism, makes a nonsensical claim about the United States' desires or Democrats and what they want for the fiat currency that we have. And now, of course, time to invest in crypto, I guess.
The Democrats are full speed into an assault to tear all of those things down. And they really want us to be part of the globalist economy. They want us to be all under one digital currency. That's what they're working towards right now. I don't know how much you've seen it, Steve, but they're big tech, big banks, and the Democrats, big government are all coming together to start cracking down on cryptocurrency. I'm solidly against it. I think we have to protect crypto. We have to protect people's ability to own and exchange this currency.
Yeah. Protect capitalists who've already bought up a bunch of the finite amount of crypto and their profits. But
investors.
Let's track how that began. So first, she starts off by talking about the globalists. So naturally, you know, it's not a Marjorie Taylor Greene segment without some sort of at least underpinning or through line of anti-Semitism. And then she talks about how the Democrats want the world to be under one digital currency. Be under one digital currency, quote. Yes, you can physically get dollars. You can get cents. You can hold it in your hand. But many times our transactions are done digitally with the dollar. And the dollar is pretty much as universal as it gets in the world. That's how the entire global economy is largely based. So is Marjorie Taylor Greene, is she in favor of China's currency competing with the dollar?
A digital currency controlled by the government? That's almost as scary as a digital currency controlled by like several coders and like people who decided to get in on the ground floor of a speculative investment. You're controlling an entire currency. The point that this does point to that I also always think is true is when it comes to things like privacy and those sorts of concerns, it's not any kind of digital currency you want. You want to protect cash, and actually Bitcoin and crypto is a Trojan horse against that sort of privacy, in my opinion, because everything's on the blockchain forever. It's an anti-privacy technology as far as I can tell. So I think you should like protecting cash by policy, which also is we talked about this recently. Places don't like cash because poor people have it.
Yeah.
Right. And I think like that would be, if you're really a populist when it comes to currency, that would be your issue, and not like how much you can flip some funny money for.
I mean, I'm still trying to decipher exactly what she said. Can you just put that back? Can we watch that one more time, Bradley? Oh, yeah. I mean, do we even need to? I descend into apathy when it comes to her. It's all good.
The Democrats are full speed into an assault to tear all of those things down. And they really want us to be part of the globalist economy.
Right.
They want us to be all under one digital currency. That's what they're working towards right now. I don't know how much you've seen it, Steve, but they're big tech, big banks, and the Democrats, big government are all coming together to start cracking down on cryptocurrency. I'm solidly against it. I think we have to protect crypto. We have to protect people's ability to own and exchange this currency.
Okay, so basically this is what I figured out. She's trying to claim that there's some sort of globalist conspiracy to create one currency that isn't the dollar, that's only digital. Even though she's promoting the general concept of digital currency via crypto, but the one that the Democrats would come up with for the globalists is really bad.
Yeah, it's so suppressed by the powers that be that it's only the name of the arena that the Los Angeles Lakers play basketball in. But that said, it should be suppressed. This should be outlawed. Yeah. There's no use for it besides money laundering and tax avoidance. and some limited movement things which are always trotted out, but guess what, it never actually comes to fruition. Like, what if we could fund strikes? Well, okay, let's see a strike get funded by this. It turns out people don't own crypto because they want to give it to the next strike that comes around. They own it because they want to flip it for more cash to somebody later on. Yeah, crypto's bullshit.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I can't wait for the moment when people like her start talking about how cancel culture is coming for crypto. That's
basically
it. Also should be clarifying that someone like her talks about protecting cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I mean, that's her class. Like that's this easy passive income. Like I think it's like that's what I look at when I see people like this. It's like, oh, you had, okay, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? Didn't her father own a construction company or something like that? So like born into it. And like, that's what appeals to people about crypto, is because you can get a lot of money with just sitting on your ass and like refreshing your phone.
Don't come for me with sports betting like that. DNC Google pundit Marjorie Taylor Greene sounds a lot like Michael's Rand Paul impression. LOL. It's always snowy in Ottawa. Have you seen the drama about the People's Party this weekend? Don't know much about Nick Brana, but it seems like they're cratering hard. I did not see the drama.
I feel like they had cratered hard. It's like cratering through a crater at this point. I feel like not having any candidates is kind of all you need to know about.
Self-immolation.
Yeah.
Aaron is not cool. I think Emma's best impression is Tulsi laughing and saying, "Oh, Sean. Oh, Sean." Right. And Trauma. Emma, I think the hybrid Gemma Dorland needs to be a recurring character. Perhaps.
Update from a Russian embassy. President Putin informed President Macron and Federal Chancellor Olaf Scholz of his intention to sign a decree to recognize Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics. So the Russian areas.
Yeah. All right. Well, I still don't think that there's going to be any ground invasion, but we shall see. SCK Landy, there are lots of non-Russian sympathizers in Ukraine. How about advocating for their position? The question is more complicated than being able to take a hard position on where responsibility lies in the current situation. But when considering the current situation, reflect OB Crimea, where Russia was directly involved in annexing part of Ukraine and they got away with it. That should be the basis of examining the situation, not the Cuban Missile Crisis.
But why did they get away with it?
I mean, I liked that Obama was not going to escalate further. That was something I appreciated about him. I mean, if we're talking about it, I don't think I'm against imperialism in general. I don't think it's analogous in this situation to what the United States participates in, but I want zero bloodshed whatsoever, 100%. And I want the people to determine how their governance should exist. Sorry, go on.
If somebody wants to IM in and say what we should do in response to Putin saying he recognizes those independent regions, I'm all ears. I'm less, but I'm also not eager to do anything about it.
Obama kind of ate shit about that. You know, you let them cross the red line here, and frankly, it was a good thing that he did that, because further escalation is what we all don't want to happen. I mean, I think on the left, we're anti-war, and it should stay that way. Sam Stones, congrats to all these callers. I got a new job last year after being in food my whole life. It feels good. There you go. Let's see if we're 3 for 3 on callers getting a new job. Calling from an 818 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Now I can.
Hello? Okay. I'm Pete Proman from Los Angeles, and my question or comment, or more question, I guess, is about with defund the police, or even if we drastically reduce the police, what becomes of all the hundreds of thousands of cops with fascist or authoritarian mindsets, and they're out in the public, in the world, in our society, out of a job, angry as hell, looking to form what? Vigilante groups, militias. I mean, it's contributing, adding to their already high levels of resentment. I mean, how do you deal with that overflow? And before you answer, I want to make one analogy to that is like when we went into Iraq, we decided to not hire I forget the name of the old military group
the Ba'ath Party.
That was under what?
The Ba'ath Party.
Yeah, the Ba'ath Party. Right. And that became a problem because now they were all resentful of us and joined ISIS and the opposing forces. And so you can see how that's an analogy to what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do.
What are your thoughts?
Well, look, I think that's your question is theoretical, right? And we're not close to this becoming a reality. This is more just an ideal to strive for. But I think that's a fair concern, absolutely, in terms of if we were to mass fire police, I think there could be a way to retain certain police in roles that are more about community, that are more community focused, and retraining and reorienting certain cops. But obviously, I think there would have to be some sort of plan or system or transition in order to make sure that police are still employed in some way by the state. But we're so far away from that the practical I can't provide a practical answer, just more vague ideas of what would be the case.
Yeah, this is all speculation, far off into the oblivion of the future speculations.
Right. And the point is that if we were at that point in society, I largely think we'd have apparatuses to more effectively absorb those kind of people if we're even talking about that.
Okay, I just wanted to throw that basic concept out there for consideration.
Thanks so much. Peter, you said?
Sure. Yeah, Pete.
Pete. Have a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Yeah, the precipice of a sort of debathification where we're sending the cops packing. I mean, that it would be insane, and it would have a similar problem because this country is one that is completely just soaked with firearms.
I was just about to say, I'm like, what else is this analogous to? I mean, heavily armed, fairly extreme people who once were, I mean,
you would need.
I'm thinking about like Afghanistan a little bit too.
You would need, you would need some sort of, I don't know, like you'll need. In America, like we can't just get rid of any. You'll need some sort of armed first response in this country that citizens can call on, to particularly if that happened, because I think you would have a problem with there's not a monopoly of force in this country.
Like not to be alarmist, but it could be like Ruby Ridge or the Bundys or something like that. I mean, like armed militiamen that now don't have a responsibility to the state at all. Like, not to be too scary about that, but like that kind of freaks me out.
Yeah. God, the Bundys. That's like who I think of most with some of the Ottawa trucker convoy people, as opposed to like labor unions. They
should start their own union and beat the Teamsters.
Right.
Be even better. The even better union for real populist truckers.
Token Funger. I get the fear of what would happen with all the fascist cops when they lose their jobs, but the alternative is to leave those fascists in the seat of power with no mechanism to hold them accountable. Random info. Putin's goal already accomplished is to raise global oil prices, giving himself, oligarchs, and Russian treasury numerous hundreds of millions of dollars to cripple this, perhaps cancel embargo of Bolivia, allowing their oil to enter world markets. That's a good question. Doubling down, what would happen to fascist police if they were fired? They wouldn't have a gun badge and legal protection. Good point. Good point. Okay. All right, let's go with this New York Post thing here. So there is a candidate running in Philly. I believe it is the 3rd district in Pennsylvania, named Alexandra Hunt. I looked on her website. Awesome platform. Emphasizes indigenous rights, Medicare for all, a lot of issues that we really care about. She has also spoken about how in the past she was a stripper in order to help pay her bills, essentially. The New York Post wrote up an article about it, naturally. Former stripper Alexandra Hunt running for Congress as soft on crime candidate. Soft on crime, right, of course. But now, honestly, Bradley, can you click on the article? Because it's even more ridiculous in terms of how they write. I mean, not shocking given who owns this paper. Oh, no, it's all right. Unsafe. You're right. New York Post is an unsafe website. Good luck pulling this one off. An ex-stripper from New York behind her... an ex-stripper from New York left behind her platform shoes for a political platform, running for Congress in Philadelphia's troubled 3rd district. Alexandra Hunt, 28, stripped during college to pay the bills, she wrote recently in the Daily Kos.
Oh, so another person forced by our lack of providing public education, higher education, having to work their way through it. Good for her.
Right. So they're kind of going with the AOC playbook here about how salacious and disgusting it is that she's a bartender, and also drumming up perverse sexual interest in her as well. It's been lucrative.
I like this message, and not only is she unapologetic about her former career, she has made it part of her campaign message. Her campaign website offers t-shirts reading, "I may have danced for money, but I'm no corporate whore," and elect hoes.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And again, I would be praising this approach if her platform wasn't good or was more standard, but her platform's also just excellent. And that's why she has the New York Post so freaked out. She used to fear the, quote, age-old stigma attached to sex work and said she was fired as a girls' soccer coach when the team found out. But now she's shouting about it from the rooftops and hopes to decriminalize sex work. My involvement in sex work was very dangerous. If I had gone missing like so many sex workers do, no one would have known how or where to find me. I began speaking about sex work and my personal involvement in the industry on the campaign trail, she wrote. Sounds incredible to me. The young leftist has described having an abortion and suffering sexual assault on social media. So again,
keep it to yourself, please.
You stomach that pain and don't let it out. We say I'm a politician and I get a woman pregnant. I want her to have an abortion, but I don't want to hear about it. The fan of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is seeking office in a mostly black, strongly Democratic congressional district represented by Democratic Representative Dwight Evans, a Philly native, who in the 1990s pushed the city to adopt New York's tough-on-crime broken windows tactics, even bringing on former NYPD Commissioner Bill Bratton to consult. Robberies are up 36% in the district this year, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because there's a pandemic and people have been left to fend to themselves.
And that's happening everywhere, specifically in urban centers. Hunt supports significantly reducing the prison population through compassionate release and end to cash bail, among other lefty planks in her campaign platform. In neighborhoods with rising violence, tougher policing isn't the answer, she tweeted recently. It's backwards thinking to punish needs-based crimes instead of moving to meet the needs. That's outrageous what she just said. Can you believe it? Hunt, who grew up in upstate Rochester, has criticized Representative Evans' personal investments in weapons and energy companies, which she tweeted are screaming corruption and special interests. And her sweatshirt says, "I may have danced for money, but I'm no corporate whore," which is, chef's kiss, as the kids say. So there she is. Bradley's crying on the floor right now, but other than that, I think the studio's more in favor of it. She graduated from the University of Richmond in 2014, then moved to Philly, where she completed a master's degree at Drexel and Temple universities. She has up to $150,000 in outstanding student loans. Probably means she's a bad person.
Well, that means you went to one of these Eastern Coast schools without having parents that could pay for your student loans.
Yes, and those are just supposed to be enclaves for rich kids, so they don't have to hear about things like debt. So I'm like loving this article because it's making me love her even more. Scroll down even more. Despite the generous financial aid package the University of Richmond provided, I was actually too poor for them, Hunt wrote in a Ballotpedia candidate survey. I graduated in 3 years to save money, even despite working 2 jobs as a server and a stripper to make ends meet. Her lived experience sounds immensely important to have in Congress. I mean, this reminds me of when Cori Bush was running the first and second time. Thankfully, she was successful the second time. About how she talked about how she was living in her car, and that was described as a moral failing by many on the right. And then this has the salacious sexual element that the New York Post can write up about. I'm sure it gets clicks. Unfortunately, ours was one of them, but hopefully this video and this content saves you the click.
Well, it seems a bit dangerous for them, like, because they've already like conditioned their readers to love that sort of stuff, right? Isn't that their Murdoch paper that has like page 3?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Page 6.
It's like one of those things where Fox News does like AOC.
You have to turn on your.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's like when they do that thing with AOC. It's like, look at AOC's policies, like free healthcare, free housing. And like, aren't conservatives potentially going to be like, that sounds kind of cool? Maybe that's like a good thing.
They're like they're way too down the rabbit hole probably to work through the psychological torture that they're in about attractive women saying things that make them uncomfortable. So they know that this is like the Daily Mail or the tabloid one-on-one. But for me, Alexandra Hunt sounds pretty cool to me. So check her out if you're in Philly and you wanna you're interested in maybe
honestly,
a progressive in your district.
More respectable than 90% of the way people make money in Congress.
Oh yeah. And that's awesome sweatshirt that she has like reflects that, right? Emma's betting problem. Since we are sharing news, I'd like to share that I just quit my job at Lockheed Martin. Today's my first day of freedom. Can I get a shofar? Oh.
Did you sneak any documents out or?
Yeah. How do we do a shofar from here? I like Matt's shofars better. Yeah. Jay Tingle, also Michelle Goldberg reported from Ottawa that she didn't see any Nazi stuff and was hugged by demonstrators. Huh. That's oh, okay. This was this follow-up to, please observe that the Times ran a headline that falsely claims a trucker convoy protester was shot. Then they had their Hong Kong correspondent attempt to cover the mass shooting at an anti-police violence demonstration in Portland. White communists. Use capitalist happy talk against these MFers. Defund the police should be reframed as right size and reorganize the police. This means moving resources from street harassment to unarmed support of communities, mental health teams, homeless crisis assistance, etc. For response to mass shootings, etc., we have firearms officers like civilized nations, otherwise no guns. Great, well said. Bulk up detectives to solve rapes, murders, sure. These are all real jobs and that current manpower can be employed doing, but also it is more intuitive for most citizens and answers questions defund does not. White supremacist fascist cops can take non-fascist positions in the reorg or go fuck themselves. White communists always killing it with the IMs for sure. Margot from Mass, I didn't get a new job, but my first book is out today. Matt Shofar, question mark?
All right, I need to go.
That fizzled.
Sound like a dog or something.
Yeah, and the dog farting maybe. All right, let's get to another call. Calling from a 308 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it is Kowalski from Nebraska.
Kowalski, I hear some equipment in the background.
Yeah, I just shut it off. So the reason I'm calling is Do you guys recall a certain Nebraska congressman back in October having a video that could have been staged in a cornfield to explain his accepting of
Yes.
foreign contributions?
We did.
Well,
We
I
did
just wanted
cover
to give people
that. What was it? Fortenberry,
yes,
right?
It is incredibly funny.
Yeah,
yes,
Fortenberry.
Nebraska's first district, Fortenberry. That would cover like Lincoln, Norfolk, Columbus, if you're familiar with the Nebraska area. Anywho, in some recent news with him, his request to get the venue changed from the Los Angeles to Nebraska was denied. Apparently, the angle that they've been going with is that the California-based FBI investigation and the California-based federal judge that's overseeing this is a biased actor in this investigation, where his campaign accepted about $30,000 from a French billionaire based in Nigeria, which is hilarious.
Yeah.
And but apparently one of the things that his legal counsel is trying to do is they want to, and they're trying to clear this with the judge, to be able to tell the jury that there might be some political bias on the side of the prosecutor going after a conservative lawmaker. And the judge is currently deliberating on whether or not the defense will be able to bring that point up, which is just hilarious, because this is just either blatant incompetence on his part or an actual, like, I guess I don't know about the legal structure itself. I think regardless it was criminal, but he's basically trying to plead ignorance on it, which is just funny.
Really funny. I mean, it's almost like he nearly fell for one of those Nigerian scams that you get in your email.
Yeah, and
They say they're a Nigerian prince or whatever. Yeah, go on.
This did open up a opportunity for someone to challenge him. So this whole ordeal will cost him severely. Even if he does win the lawsuit, his credibility has been hurt pretty bad. Most of the channels I follow into any of the politicking shows that a lot of the higher ups in like the party establishment are pretty angry over this whole thing. So like, this is going to cost him a lot. And, you know, it's just funny.
It's good.
So there's just some good news out there, some good feel-good stories still. So
we were just criticized for not doing enough feel-good stories. So Kowalski, thank you for helping balance the program.
Oh, of course. Also, I've been enjoying your lead on the show. I'm glad you got that old man out of there. He was kind of, holding you back. So, good luck with the rest of your week. I'm going to get back to moving hay.
All right. Good luck, Kowalski. Wonder how Sam's doing down there. Magic Kingdom first stop? We'll see. Brain Party, did you guys see China plans to sanction the U.S. over military contractors selling arms to Taiwan? Pretty freaking poggers, if you ask me. Miss Heathen, did you guys hear about the mass shooting in Portland during a BLM protest? 5 were injured and 1 has died. The police claim it was an argument between a homeowner and a protester, so they started shooting people. And police still haven't released the identity. As far as I know, it's the moment. There's a GoFundMe for the victims of the shooting if you're interested in helping. The protest medics are effing heroes who were attending the shot like it was a war zone. These attacks on leftist protests in Portland has become a recurring theme. I haven't heard about this story, but everyone should check that out. And if it sounds like what you're saying, it reeks a little bit. So if you want to support the victims there, please do. All right.
Yeah, I think Andy No might have been in the vicinity of amplifying that, but I have to check on that. First, a guest of the Dark Horse podcast. Andy.
Yeah, right. So, this Menendez clip, did you put that in here, Matt, or did you, Bradley? Yeah, we'll do that. Bob Menendez, senator from New Jersey, is an openly corrupt individual I cannot believe he's still in power. He had a primary challenger that did a little bit better than expected a few years ago, but he still hung on to power. The New Jersey Democratic Party seemed very disinterested in weeding out such an openly corrupt individual, but nonetheless, he's still around. He has been at the forefront of pushing Russian sanctions. And here he, sorry, what? Oh, no, here he is framing the issue of taxation differentials among states in a way that I think is really problematic for Democrats and should be a lesson in what not to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I didn't come here to talk about SALT, but since the ranking member raised it, let me just say, if I was Pennsylvania, I'd like the way things are. Pennsylvania gets $15 billion more from the federal treasury than it contributes to the federal treasury. So if we could do that, I'd be happy to make a deal with all of my colleagues who have a problem with SALT that we'll just get back whatever we send. And New Jersey would be very happy. Because there are maker states like New Jersey that invest in education and research and development, in infrastructure that helps it drive the economy and sends billions to the federal treasury more than it gets in return. So it's a maker state. And then there are those states that I call moocher states that get a lot more than it sends to the federal treasury. If you want to continue to have states that are maker states, that are blue chip states, that make money for the federal treasury, then just continue to ox the state and local property tax deduction, which is the longest serving part of the federal code in terms of a deduction. And you will see those states be less of maker states so that you can continue to mooch off of it.
So that is, okay.
Appalling.
The appalling. The best way to interpret that is that he is trying to appeal to his constituents by speaking in that way. Another wrinkle to it is he's using Pennsylvania as an example. Pretty bizarre. Did that have anything to do with an exchange with a senator or?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure he was talking about Pat Toomey.
I was about to say, was it Pat Toomey? Yeah, okay.
And just to your point, Em, about the primary challenger he had literally like $3,000 in the bank.
Barely ran.
And
yeah.
got 40% of the vote. Like a potted plant could beat Bob Menendez in New Jersey.
Yeah, it was one of the more depressing. Was that 2018? Yeah. 2018 developments, because he definitely was beatable, but there was a pretty significant suppression of his primary challenge, despite having open corruption investigations into him, or that having been the case. But regardless, this is why maybe, I don't know, Democrats don't do super well in certain areas of the country. One, yes, it's a propaganda effort. Yes, it's because the Republicans are more well-funded, but it's also because of attitudes like this. And he's using a classist argument about other states that don't have the resources that New Jersey does, but is because it's in the immediate vicinity of New York City and in Philadelphia in the South.
That's the thing, is like New Jersey, the main industries by a long shot are
Pharma.
Finance and professional business services, and like
pharma too.
And those so-called maker states, like maybe that was true like a bygone era of American manufacturing, but what that means now is you basically are monetizing and bringing to market and capitalizing on all the other taker states, all the resources in those taker states, right? Like that's why I mean, it's really, really something to sit there as Bob Menendez and call other states like, yeah, you're like the loading dock for New York. I mean, sorry, no offense to New Jersey, but like,
hey,
whoa,
no, but that's the truth. That's the truth. It's just like, you know, stockbrokers that want a little bit more greenery, and then they'll go to their Wall Street apartment at night and blow some lines and have an affair with their mistress. I mean, that's like a lot of what happens in Jersey.
Like, look at us making all of these securities, and like, I think no, you're not making anything by moving money around, like people's mortgages and stuff in the rest of the country.
And Em and I are from New Jersey, and we're saying this.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I've met too many of those folks who are not makers. And they're not even particularly likable. But the point is that he is using this classist argument to justify a state and local tax deduction for further allowing the wealthiest people in his state, and this affects New York, and it affects suburbs and blue areas.
Who gets that deduction? Is that the makers? Is that the maker deduction?
Apparently.
You make stuff with your hands. Is it just you do hard labor? You get that SALT deduction.
The passive income deduction, the sit on your ass deduction, after you've accumulated enough capital to put it into some sort of fund. Anyway.
I mean, you wonder why the Democratic Party is where it is, where kids are just going to go hungry now when they didn't need to be. We're just going to let that lapse. Remember back when the child tax credit came in, and it's like, oh yeah, it's going to be hard for Democrats to, let this lapse. No, it wasn't.
No,
it wasn't. They just let it lapse because this is who they are.
Yeah, and that's why, last point on this, he mentioned Pennsylvania. That's why Fetterman's a really refreshing candidate, and important to bring back certain voters to the Democratic Party, because having guys like this say just people in Pennsylvania are take or moochers, it's a middle finger, and it's a gift to the Republicans. It's just, this is why the party needs to be fundamentally reshapen.
It allows him to say his class thing, but make it about blue and red states, basically.
Mm-hmm. But Pennsylvania, again, is a bad example, even though it was in a spat with Toomey. It's a especially bad example when you have a pro-union populist Democrat who could potentially actually win. Like, fuck off. Dr. Nick, holy shit, I didn't know the average MR listener was so effing hawkish. No, the average listenership is a bit more centrist liberal than me, but wow, this is pretty astounding. Not making me feel great about general trends towards war countrywide, tinges of 2003. I don't think you need to worry that hard, and I think our audience is fine is good on that topic. I did a little bit more research about this topic, and I listened to 2 separate podcasts and read a bit over the weekend, and it radicalized me a bit, so maybe that's why people are not understanding where I'm coming from. Jen Hexer, not a good look for a Democrat. It sounds so much like Mitt Romney. Yes. Calling from a 757 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
So it's so fucking phenomenally weird.
Dude.
Even if you weren't.
Yo, hey, you there?
Hey.
Cool.
Okay, I think it might me to move on. From
all right, bye-bye. Sorry, 757.
Why? What? That's interesting.
He's on another call. Calling from a 540 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, let me just get off speaker.
Okay.
This is Mike from Virginia.
Mike from Virginia. How are you?
I am doing good. By the way, just before I start, I want to say that you've been great ever since you were on TYT, and it's great that you moved out here.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So I guess I have a comment and a question. The right is really good at messaging, making long-term plans, the whole 9 yards, and the left is bad at it.
Yeah.
We want to go with that. One of the things that I'm concerned about and I'm curious about is why the left isn't making more of a push for ranked choice voting to kind of eliminate the negative campaigns that are out there, as well as get more progressive candidates visible and in the public scope.
One quick example is, didn't New York have ranked choice voting?
Yes.
Then Eric Adams is is a mayor. It's good, but there are a lot of things to fight for, and like I don't think ranked choice voting is really the panacea people expect it to be, because I think you do get a lot of like the spoilery type stuff going on, and it gets easier to dilute, and I don't think it necessarily. I think people like it because they think it'll help the left, but I don't think that's necessarily how it plays out in practice. And I mean, just in history, I'll just know in North Dakota history, it worked out well to just take over those ballot lines as opposed to like, try to have a whole bunch of like a parliamentary system grafted onto this system. So I think it's that reason. I don't think the upside is quite there. And I think that's why you have places willing to allow it, frankly.
I get that. It's frustrating because I don't necessarily know what the answer is, because we want to generally transform the party, but transforming the party with the people that are currently in power, it makes it difficult. Yep. We have a hard time getting there, and granted, we've got AOC and Cori Bush, and we've got people that are getting in there, but you're talking, if we continue at this rate, we're talking 30, 40, 50 years from now, maybe we'll be in a position to have progressive policies on a national scale and progressive candidates there. And I would kind of like to make that happen a little bit.
Yeah, I think you can make it contextual to the region you're in. It wasn't that. I think it might help along the margins. I just do think that when you have power structures that are so omnipotent like we have in the US, and it's already hard to break through, they will usually figure out in a short period of time how to rig those things in their favor.
It's got to be it's a little bit of both, like the sort of internal factors and the outside factors. Like I'm reading a book on the St. Louis Commune of 1877 for an upcoming Left Reckoning episode, and the thing is like an external event happens, and then you go and you have to address it with the organizations that you have at that time. And so it'd be nice to have, I would prefer to have an independent socialist party that, doesn't have to kowtow to the Democratic Party at all. We don't have that. What we have is like a squad and then some DSA justice type stuff, and then some independent socialists on a local level. And you need to kind of cultivate that. But to go back to like the St. Louis example, that there was a general strike that started basically because of railroads and stuff like that, and it wasn't like because of the Marxist parties. They didn't say we're going to start this strike. The strike happened because people were just fed up with it, and then they looked to the organizations that most best spoke to what they were fed up with when that happened. And so I'm saying you have to kind of look at these things. I agree with what you're saying, that it's not happening fast enough. If you just look at the squad, right? Compared to like the Tea Party, everyone knows the Tea Party was way ahead of where the squad is at the same amount of time. I guess the hope is you just got to keep organizing and then take advantage of shocks like that. I mean, where has DSA grown? It's grown when like Trump won office and things like that. People respond to events, I think, and all we can do is try to keep building.
Appreciate the call. Thanks so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
And let me just say, like, ranked choice voting is preferable.
Yeah.
It's just not like, it's not
the end all be all. Yeah. It's not the like the poison pill or whatever for the oligarchy. All right, I'm going into this cold. Lil Wayne Gretzky just wrote in, did you guys hear the new cringe song from Jordan Peterson? It's called Wake Up. So Matt and I, Bradley just watched a little of it. Matt and I are going into this cold. I mean, wish us luck. I might seize up.
Hold on to
some
your
sort of
horses.
Medical episode here. Is this would you describe this as a rock and roll song, Bradley?
Is this a cover of the Rage Against the Machine song?
Or the Arcade Fire song?
Wake up. Okay, go on.
Sad child?
Daguerreotypes.
2 children?
And the little girl has a mischievous look on her face.
What child that speaks you some that love got you so alone. You should be doing so. You could have built a home, but now you're on your own. You should be acting well.
Hold on, pause it.
Climb off your
There's one note that's being played. Yeah. You should climb off your throne. You should be doing well. All right. They're just pointing that out. Hello, what do you know? Okay, just press play.
I see what you've been shown. You might think this is wrong. I can't see this. Should be going home. Should be doing good. Should be waking up.
Is this him?
Should be going home. Should be acting well. Should be well.
No, I mean, keep going. I want to see if he presses a separate note on his guitar center, or what's it called? Guitar. What was the Apple app thing? Damn.
Oh, I don't know.
Whatever. GarageBand. Yeah, he's pressing one or two notes repetitively on this. Is he singing right now?
Yeah, that's my question. So that's him singing? Wait, can you just go look into the credits? So taking this off full screen for a second. Look, what's in this description? I need a little bit more here. Wake up, dedicated under the current unfortunate conditions.
Okay, here we go. Composition. So this is a message to Trudeau. Jordan Peterson and Scotch Tully. Lyrics by Jordan B. Peterson. Images and illustrations, like, I don't know, by some ghost from 1846. Yeah. Why is it in a silent movie format?
Voices, it is Jordan Peterson and like family, it looks like.
So he's it's like a woman who's singing the verses, and he plays himself in the chorus to.
Does anything change? Is it just this dumb voice the entire time? Maybe skip to like 2/3 of the way through, because I can't make it through another 2 minutes of this.
Oh my god! But wait, the slow zoom on these faces is.
Well, we're not skipping anything then. But okay, sure. All right, let's try.
Oh, it has these riffs that he loves. He cries about guitar riffs. It's such a beautiful expression. Bro.
Listener, Fuzz told me where to go. I don't know where to turn. I don't know where to go. I don't know where to turn.
Most low budget ass video.
Should be headed home. Could be on your own.
This could be about any
should you stop and think. You should be doing well. You should be waking up. You should be waking
All right. Well, so he is going through an emo phase, I guess. And also like completely derivative off of Pink Floyd, right? Like that's what that is. He's just doing a Pink Floyd impression,
yeah,
right?
like Scott Walker, or like, so yeah, someone said Sid Barrett in the chat. Like that's like pretty accurate. Also, like you said, Emma, this could be about
anything. You should be waking up. You should be going home. Wow, is he advocating for people to? Oh, this is what it's a message. It's he's being Trudeau to the trucker convoy.
It was inspired to the truck. I'm pretty sure, yeah.
All right. Well, he's very, very untalented.
I just think my life would have been a lot happier if I could just sit in here with a guitar and going through my different fuzz pedals to find the perfect tone for the solo. If you haven't found the perfect tone for your solo, how can you really criticize the world?
The guitar solo is everything. And if it's everything, it's also everything.
That video reminded me of people look up an actually good music video, kind of similar, sort of like American blues rock, done a little bit better by "I Say Fever" by the band Ramona Falls.
Do you think he was crying as he sang that?
I think several times. He
Yeah.
broke down.
Well, my guitar not so gently weeps, I guess. District Jabroni, sorry, not less drugs, just excessively did benzos. Oh, you're talking about. Will from Indiana, the guitar solo sounds like it was recorded with a Fisher-Price recorder. God, my ears hurt. If the Kermit the Frog caller could call back into a parody of this, I think we would all love it. Illuminati Kids, pretty bad song. I'd recommend Peterson to do a vocal cover of The Doors' People Are Strange in his normal speaking voice for a possible novelty hit. Dank Uger.
Actually, any Pink Floyd song in Jordan Peterson's voice, like Saint-Tropez.
His name is Robert Paulson. Jordan Peterson is clearly on drugs. You'd think they'd make him cooler, but no. Tom from Akiba, Marilyn Manson, in my humble opinion. There we go. Now people walk Pink Floyd for youngsters, says Teacher Dan. There we go. Wow, definitely stealing from Floyd. New Jordan Peterson song for if you like Pink Floyd but wish they voted for Thatcher and did less drugs. Future in doubt. Jordan Peterson's song sounds like the early 70s Genesis. Peter Gabriel should be pissed, as should any real Genesis fan. That was funny. Teacher Dan, Floyd ripoff. Wow, all right. I think I was on point with that then. Amanda Hugen Kiss. Benzo Kermit needs to stop while he's behind. Emma Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Sounds like they got Ben Carson to play the piano for them. Obamagate hotel plumber. Bob Menendez's top priorities are overthrowing left-wing Latin American governments and using the American government to specifically do regime change in Cuba. Yep. But he's not just a traitor to the working class. He's a traitor, period. All right, let's take one more call. Who to pick? Calling from a 727 number. Is this where you're calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going. How about you?
I was good until I heard that Jordan Peterson song.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
I
was like,
it's tough.
No, I can't believe he has brought back so much of my early days listening to classic rock in the worst ways possible.
What's your name and where are you calling from?
Well, I'm up in the mountains in Colorado. My name's Ian.
Ian from Colorado.
Yeah. I was just calling because of like the guy who was talking before. I have like it's just a small point about like basically, you know, he was kind of confused or wondering what could be done about the left's progression and like getting their side across and kind of their stance in like the Democratic Party.
Okay.
And I just kind of thought it was, you know, a lot more like it's a thing that you should kind of look at when it comes to how honestly, like, I don't want to be, you know, don't want to be like attacked for this, but kind of like how, you know, Trump did it with Breitbart and all that stuff. You need to like have like some kind of culture change in the Democratic Party completely through people like yourselves, like you guys, the media, actually getting stories right, getting things right, saying, you know, what people want, like all the, you know, social services that we need in this country.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that we really need to strengthen, you know, good media outlets, people like you guys, people that actually, you know, talk about the right things, don't engage in so much culture war, don't engage in so much of just like obvious corporate buyout, stuff. It's just, we need to have something that we're actually talking about real things people want, and have that be way more the focus of the media that we're engaging with.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope we're doing a small part to make things a little bit better and communicate things a bit better. I definitely feel the responsibility and try to do my best for sure. But we'd love to be more influential.
Yeah, I think it's something that it takes a lot of. Unfortunately, it just takes a lot of understanding who the enemy is within the Democratic Party. People like Sinema, people like Manchin, who are just stagnating the whole situation, obviously bought out by corporate interests who don't have any reflection towards the Democratic left, the base, and they and this not to give Trump any too much credit, but he wouldn't stand for something like that in his own party. He would have been calling those people out every day.
Well, I mean, that's the case in point for what happened with Nancy Mace, right? She said one thing that he didn't like, and he doesn't care about Republican success for the sake of Republican success. He's like, if you are not with me, I'm going scorched earth against you. And the Democrats shouldn't do that in terms of cults of personality, but there's a case to be made that they should, not a case to be made. They should do that for people like, I don't know, Bob Menendez or something like that, or corporatists, and
Party
wield their
discipline.
power. Right.
Good.
The problem is that it's to have an inside-outside strategy. You have to have people who have real power on the inside. And right now we have a Democratic Party leadership apparatus that is ancient in their thinking and won't let go of power for the next few years, are refusing to do so. But let's build up the power structures enough so that when they do, we go full court press.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. But I think that also it takes, the base that's already there, the base that wants these things, just actually having a little bit more I don't know if it's more vigor or more, tenacity to these, people that are completely stalling our progress when we have, a Democratic president. And I just feel like when we had Trump, they were passing so many things, getting so many things done that were bad. And now that we have the control in some ways, there are people within our own party that are stagnating that progress that we should have.
Right.
Yeah, there are limits to what it can accomplish. Trump got stymied plenty too. He wasn't able to get rid of Obamacare, the wall, right?
Yeah.
But the problem, but also, it still has a positive effect for what, say, Trump wanted in that case, because he disciplined the party into being more like his image for the future. And that's why, even if you don't get, because look, that's why Bernie was the only choice in the last two primaries. And it's also probably why he probably wouldn't have been able to accomplish a lot, because he would have faced a lot of obstruction from these folks. And it would have been, but at least it would have got us farther. Be more conscious of the type of obstacles that we're going to have to go through to, say, decommodify healthcare in this country.
All right, Ian.
Yeah, and I just appreciate it. Thank you so much again. You guys have a great day.
Yeah, you too. You can add your last point if you'd like. Oh, he hung up. All right, we will read some IMs and then just get out of here. Sam is swagless. Wake up from your... Yeah, right. Wake up from the dream of your masturbating grandma, Pink Floyd. All right. That's not... I wish I didn't read that one. Prairie Fire Kowalski. What's really sad is they probably thought that musical number was emotionally captivating as emotionally captivating as Zombies by Cranberries. Congressional baseball fan, keep this up, Canada, and we'll take away your other baseball team so LA can have another pro sports team. Jen Hexer, Roger Waters called and he wants his song back. Illuminati Kids, pretty bad song. I'd recommend Peterson do a vote. Oh, wait, I already read that. Skalandi, here's your Ukraine solution. Demand Putin pull his troops back, and if those pro-Russian regions want to succeed, they can petition their government for their succession. It's no more Russia's business than ours. I think that was, I thought I made it clear that I want the Ukrainian people in those regions to have self-determination. If I didn't, that is my opinion. Without the United States pouring a ton of money in to push for NATO expansion. Dave Perret, do you folks have a relationship with Just Coffee Co-op? Haven't heard you talk about them in a while. Yes, sorry about that. Just Coffee is an amazing brand. You guys should definitely buy the Majority Report blend. If you haven't yet, check them out. We do still have a relationship with them. So good, great company, great practices, the whole 9 yards. Jay Tingle, Portland PD have yet to announce an arrest in the mass shooting that killed a woman on Saturday. Weird. Jack Taper, start an ex-cop wrestling or football league. Get all their aggression out. Have you read my email? I am anti-imperialist and anti-war too. I do wonder what we do next time Russia acts like this or the time after this. I don't have a point or anything or even really an idea myself. But I do sometimes wonder how much we as the West should accept of Putin. Yeah, I mean, the point about Putin is like, well, I mean, we've already gotten into this a lot. He's an authoritarian. He has consolidated a lot of money for the wealthy interests in his country. He's not somebody that the left should embrace, but the historical trends and relationships between Russia and the United States are something that need to come into the context of the conversation surrounding Ukraine. That's really my position. Chris from Taiwan, it seems there are more critical messages in the IMs these days, and y'all are handling them very well. Thank you.
I just think, like, what's the... I don't like that we have the largest military in the world, but what's the point of having that if, like, you're going to be preemptive and so fucking anxious about stuff? Like, let other countries do... I don't mean let it, but, like, if other aggression happens, it happens, and then you address it. Like, nobody checked us when we invaded Afghanistan or Iraq, right? Like, yeah. It's just such a weird... It's just weird conversations. Like,
And Ukraine isn't in NATO yet.
And now we're talking about also, like, we get IMs about, like, how we need to be on guard for China and Taiwan. It's like, again, like, I don't know if maybe there's diplomatic stuff that you can do once they actually, like, you know, author some aggression on the globe that, you know, is, again, like, in the context of what we do in other countries, it's hard for me to, like, get that animated about how we're not doing enough yet.
Yeah. 3 more. Stupid sexy candy. Almost certainly told Steve's appearance at CPAC will be touted as true by Patterson ship from real... What? I'm sorry. I don't know if that makes sense grammatically. All right, just a few more. Tony from Texas, looking forward to Tucker Carlson's segment about how JBP is now pushing woke culture with his new song. Tony from Texas. And the final IM of the day. I feel like IMers today believe that Emma and Matt just want Russia to glass every part of Ukraine that isn't pro-Russian. It's a complex situation. Imperialism is complicated.
They want us to what?
Glass, he said.
I mean, what's people say, like, just it's complex as if they've said something. Like,
no, but that was Kowalski.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough. I thought this was something to criticize.
No. He said he's trying to basically say that he feels like we're fine with them invading Ukraine. My point is not the.
I think if they like if tanks like roll through Kiev, I think there's like something the international community can like address.
Yes.
Right. Like, but like that's the thing that frustrates me is because And
it also depends on what the Ukrainian people in that region want.
Yes, and I don't like the way, like, this is not a good way to achieve autonomy. I don't think in the context of it's not in a great situation, right? But it's not like one that I would, I just don't know what people want the response to be.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, we are going to say goodbye. Tomorrow's a new day. And maybe we'll talk a little bit less about Russia, Ukraine, because I think we've exhausted it. But appreciate it, guys. Hopefully you'll get that Jordan Peterson songs out of your head and be able to sleep tonight. If that's the case, we'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth